Okay, we're live. So I'm really excited to present to everyone Tamzin, who has been doing some really fascinating research on obesity and human interaction with horses, and how obesity is really related to humans and animals working together, not just animals on their own. She will phrase it in a much better way than I will shortly in a second. But I think we always look at obesity as a medical problem, and Tamsin's taken the time to look at it as a social problem. We're all stuck in both humans and horses are stuck in an obesogenic environment where it's really easy for weight to go on, for us all to get heavier and heavier. And it's how we can actually move forward in a constructive way rather than a critical way, um, uh, for everyone to lose weight and for our horses to lose weight too. I'm certainly not out of that. So um, I'm really pleased again to have Tamsin on. Um, Tamsin, thanks for joining us. Would you be able to talk everyone through your PhD? I think it was really interesting and quite creative of you to think of this. So would you be able to talk through the sort of thing you've been doing?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And thank you for having me and the lovely introduction. Yeah, so basically, the kind of premise was that, um, like you said, obesity has always been looked at in horses as a medical issue, and in some senses, it is a medical issue. But the treating obesity has always also been treated as a medical thing. So, like, as any owners who are interested who have experienced this have probably found that maybe they get told to put your horse on a 1.5% diet and increase the exercise by this much, and so on and so on, and have been given some kind of numbers to work to. But what we wanted to do was kind of look in a bit more depth at what's actually going on for owners and what's it like keeping horses, and why is it that it's so common for us to have overweight and obese horses in this country, because it really is another epidemic.
Yeah,
Just what we need, another
yeah.
epidemic on top of COVID. um, and so why is that happening? And once we've understood better the reasons behind it, then we can work out how to solve them. And everyone has their own ideas about the reasons for this massive obesity epidemic, and those are very true. Like, most people are aware that lots of horses are kept on grass intended for dairy cows, for example. We've got much milder winters now. We have lots of those native ponies and lovely cobs in the UK. And we were talking before about, our lovely native breeds like Highland ponies, which are just amazing, but equally really don't need so much
Yeah, we've
food.
got plenty of them
So
here.
we were we were really interested in how what's going on for owners, and how is it that some people manage to keep them in at a really healthy weight, and other people have issues, and what's the differences there, and then what can we learn from the people who have kind of managed to make a change or managed to keep their horses at a healthy weight, so we can address the obesity in other horses in a really holistic way, rather than just giving people kind of numbers that they work to. So we used what we call qualitative methods, which is like where you look at people's experiences rather than kind of counting how many fat horses are there or whatever. We look at what's going on for people. We do, for example, interviews, and follow through people's experiences to work out what was important for them about that. And so I did that for 3 years, basically, which was great. And we did lots of different things, like, attending shows and talking to lots of different participants, talking to equine behaviorists, vets, farriers, as well as horse owners, livery yard managers, and so on. And what we found, as you said in the introduction, is that basically we have what we call an obesogenic environment around horses. So we have an obesogenic environment is one where, all things being equal, the animals or people that live within it are kind of more likely to put on weight because of the way that the environment is structured. So with people, we have an obesogenic environment in places where, for example, you don't have like green spaces to exercise in. You've got lots of fast food, which is very easily accessible and incredibly cheap in comparison to,
And
say,
does that
organic
include
vegetables.
things like, Mars bars at the till, and
Oh
things like
yeah,
that? Yeah.
definitely, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and yeah, that's such a good point, because supermarkets, they purposely create obesogenic environments. There's like a whole science behind like how to design a supermarket so people will buy all the products and all. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
So
and what
yeah,
you're
but we
saying is that
similarly,
this is sort of copying into the horse world. They've sort of copied the
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact, that we have all these like milder winters, the grass, and also our changing relationships with horses. So nowadays we don't want to, most people don't have a horse as like a piece of sporting equipment
Yeah,
anymore, whereas maybe before, a horse would have been for hunting or whatever. Now we have horses because we want the relationship with them, which means that we don't want them to like work in the same way. So they do a lot less exercise, really. So yeah, so I was very lucky to speak to many horse owners about that and about what we can do to kind of move forward with that, really, which I
and
guess we'll be talking about.
I reckon I was speaking to a colleague earlier this afternoon, and I, I I think it's quite likely that you get different answers to if I, as a vet, ask
Mm,
them. I think quite often,
yeah,
I think quite often people are giving me answers that I think they want to give me. They think I want to
yes,
hear. Whereas,
yes,
you'll have the advantage that people will probably speak much more openly and actually give you some real answers.
yeah,
Whereas I just get, what I want to hear, what'll make me
yeah,
happy, which is very
yeah,
kind of them.
definitely.
But
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a real scale on the truth, and we all do this, myself included. When I have my vets and my horse, I definitely want to present my kind of best self and tell him that I've done literally, yes, I've definitely long reined my horse every single day for his kissing spines, for example. So yeah, and obviously we don't mean to do that. It's not that people purposely lie or
yeah,
anything. It's just we have things that we'll say to other people that are socially acceptable, and then we have the things that we think we do, and then even those are different from the things we actually do. So I mean,
yeah,
most people are aware that like nowadays when they say like light work on feed bags, most of us, um our horses don't barely even get to light work. I think
yeah,
it's probably the average these days, but yeah, we might tell ourselves, oh, they're in medium work, for example, because we kind of want that perception of our horses,
yeah.
which is a
And
tricky one.
so, what sort of came out of that PhD? Because you're done now. You're a doctor. That's you. What sort of things came out of that? I mean, I'm sure you wrote probably 1,000 pages on your PhD,
Did,
but
yeah, hopefully has to read that ever. My poor
but
examiners. Um,
what for you were some of the sort of some of the
yeah,
main topics that
yeah. Well, the one of the really important things for me was that we had kind of practical tools that came out of this, and I was really impressed by the way that horse owners, when you speak to a lot of horse owners, there's actually a lot of creativity about different ways of managing weight. So whereas one of the things we found was that people were actually a bit put off. Sometimes vets would say like ride your horse, lunge your horse, and then people feel a bit anxious about it because they're like, oh well, I can't ride. Maybe they're fearful of riding, or the horse is, I don't know, I've got arthritis or whatever. There's actually a lot more creativity, and so people were doing things like turning the horse out with youngsters, or riding one horse and leading another horse, or hiking with horses has become a thing. How cool is that?
that's brilliant.
God, there are people who take the horse on like 20-mile hikes. I just think that's amazing, and
I
why
think
not?
I think
um
people in the Highlands have been doing that for years. They just call it
oh,
something else.
there you go. We
You
all need
just
to follow the Scots. You
you don't
guys
have
have
to have
all the right.
a dead stag to do it. You can
Amazing.
you
Yeah,
can do it
you guys have
anywhere.
all the answers.
But yeah,
Yeah. So basically, so what we did was to gather all of the creative weight management strategies people were using. And these ranged from things like, I don't know, riding and leading, to using track systems, for example, which have become increasingly popular for managing weight. Um, all sorts of things like that. And we've basically created a guide, which we can share afterwards, if you like, which helps owners to break down and uses kind of a decision-making tool, not to tell you what to do, but to find the weight management strategies that will work for you and your horse in any situation. So it helps you to break down, like, so what things in terms of exercise can you change, if any, or like what things in terms of your paddock configuration can you change, so that owners can work out what suits them. Because we found, and I often get asked the question, so are grazing muzzles the best way of managing weight? And the answer is always, it totally depends on the horse and owner. Like for one horse and owner, then absolutely they're the perfect answer, but for another they might severely inhibit the welfare of the horse because for whatever reason. So that we've got this kind of practical tool that helps owners to find out what's going to suit them.
That's brilliant.
That's the
And
main.
sorry to keep interrupt. I always interrupt you. You've obviously got yeah, you know so much.
Sorry.
But is that so? If I post a link in the comments
Mm.
afterwards for everyone, that's the sort of thing that you'll be going through in detail in your talk.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right. Yes, so we'll be
yeah,
talking about how people can apply that sort of knowledge, basically,
yeah,
so that they can work out the best for them and their horse.
yeah. No, I think that I think that's really interesting, and I think highlighting that just going back to what you said earlier, highlighting the obesogenic environment, I think is really,
Mm.
there are so many rugs available. Some of them are
Mm.
probably enough for, a human to survive the winter under. There's
Yeah,
so many togs or grams or whatever, the
definitely.
company decides to call it,
Yeah,
that, they are so warm.
yeah,
And there's every option, and you always feel every winter you need to get a new rug because you're nice
yeah.
to your
It's got
horse to
new
actually.
prints on the unicorn
Exactly.
rugs this year, or the
Yeah.
cupcakes, or whatever it
I know.
is.
Um, and then when you go to the tack shop, there's always treat bars. There's always everything,
Yeah,
especially the
supplements.
molasses ones, which
Yes,
probably contain quite a lot of sugar. Um,
yes.
and I think that sort of leads on to something we were talking about before coming
Mm,
on, which was I think I'm finding that, and I think there's more and more talk about it, that laminitis
mm,
seems to be happening earlier and earlier on. We
mm,
always think of it, and part of the reason for this talk is, we think of it sort of March, April
mm,
time as the grass is growing through.
mm.
But I have been finding that uh, that it's happening earlier and earlier. And,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear what you think about that. I've
Mm,
got some of my own ideas, but I'd be interested to hear if you've seen that.
mm.
Um, uh,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm very good friends with Dee Pollard, who is a researcher in laminitis epidemiology, and she absolutely found in her studies that there was plenty of laminitis still happening in winter. And I think it's interesting because I think it feels to me like horse owners are very aware of the risk from, for example, frosty turnout. But often, what, from my point of view, doesn't necessarily come across is people are very worried about their horses being cold and kind of maintaining weight over winter and looking after them and whether it's stabling or giving ad lib hay or whatever. But as a result, they don't drop as much weight over winter as you ideally would like. So a lot of the Facebook groups I'm on now, people are really starting to say, "Oh, I fed ad lib hay all winter because it was cold, but now my horse is really fat coming into spring. What can I do?" And my feeling is that we probably need to get better at allowing our horses to warm themselves up in the winter, not in a cruel way. I'm not saying they should shiver their weight off and we all need to clip them out,
yeah.
but allow me a bit more of that metabolism. Does that chime with your view as a vet, or do you have different
Yeah,
views?
I think so. I think the quality of our preserved foods is so much better.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
there are companies who specialize now in making hay and haylage, so that
Yeah,
it's not the terrible, dry, dusty stuff that
yeah,
everyone knows and thinks hay of.
mm,
Even hay
yeah,
is half green now, and I do
mhm,
just wonder whether there's so much sugar in basic
yeah,
hay that even
yeah,
if that's just fed in the winter, that we're putting our
mm,
horses at risk.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
we.
Claire.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say Claire Mcleod, the nutritionist, who's another person I collaborate with. She's an independent nutritionist, but she does a lot of hay nutrition analysis and haylage. And she often says that we just have incredible quality nowadays, and we don't always account for that. And especially with our native ponies and cobs, they really don't need the volume that we often want to give them, especially
Yeah,
to keep them warm, for example. So we have to be
yeah.
so careful with the weight of food they're getting.
So we've just got some comments here. So we've got um, Debbie listening in. Thanks, Debbie, for joining us. And we've got Sharon, um, who has asked us a question. I'll just try and pop that on screen for you to
Oh
have
yeah.
a read. So she's got a horse that's recovering from laminitis, Cushing's, insulin resistance. You've had a tough time, Sharon. Um, Her weight's
Yeah.
now at the correct figure, and they're doing daily exercise. How about a day off every so often, or what would you think from the things that you've come up with about
Well,
exercise?
how about I answer that from my point of view, and then you answer that from a vet point of view? Does that sound
Uh,
good?
Go ahead.
Um, okay, so my point of view is, wow, well, you've had a rough time, Sharon, and well done hugely on getting your horse to the correct weight. Now you've obviously done a lot of hard work there. So I know that there are studies that have showed that even 15, 20 minutes walking a day can really help horses to become more insulin sensitive, which is fantastic. So if you're doing 1 hour minimum a day, you're making good strides in increasing your horse's insulin sensitivity, and hopefully that's helping with its weight. My view would be that, yeah, absolutely, a day off for you and your horse is probably quite important for you mentally as well as an owner, because yes, I know how hard it is when you feel like you really have to do that every day. And my feeling would be that that's not going to harm your horse. If anything, probably going to be good for them, as long as you kind of keep up the work the rest of the time. But well done, huge well done. What do
Yeah,
you reckon, James?
I think Tamsin, I completely agree. I think, um, a lot of things are trial and effect. So we've got the social side there, where, you know,
Mm,
I think you're more likely to maintain all the hard work that you're doing if you occasionally
mm,
get a break and you don't overdo
mm,
it, and your horse doesn't overdo it, and is probably more interested in the exercise.
mm,
But the sort of straightforward thing is to, and we'll sort of come on to this about weight clinics and things, is, if you do take a day or two off, or a day off a week, is to see if the weight maintains low. And if it maintains low, then it's absolutely fine, but you've got all the other benefits. So
mm,
I think there's a lot of sense in it, but the straightforward
mm,
thing is to test it. So yeah, I think so. I think we've got another comment from Sharon just back. Thanks, Sharon. This is
mm.
great. Just saying she's managed to lose 200 kilograms this year from a horse, which,
No.
yes,
Oh,
that
that's
that's very
amazing, Sharon.
impressive. Yeah, I
Wow,
think, I
that's
think you deserve a
incredible.
pat on the
You
back
post,
for that.
yeah, definitely. If you, yeah, if you'd be so kind as to post some before and after pictures,
Yeah,
and maybe that could be a real inspiration for other people. Well
yeah,
done, you. That's
I
amazing.
know, that's really impressive.
That's a pony. Your pony was carrying around another pony.
It really is. It really is. Um, One of the things that we chatted about, and I think this is the sort of purpose of some of your current studies, is uh, managing weight loss when you keep your horse on a yard, and there's
Mm,
interaction with other horse owners. There's interaction with the owner of the yard, who may or may
mm,
not be very involved in the care of your horse,
mhm.
um, and it's sort of how best to achieve care when either there are lots of people involved, or there are just lots of people with different opinions. Does that?
Yeah, yeah, agreed. That's something that came up a lot in our study, and often does with horse owners who feel that real peer pressure to give a big feed, or use the rugs or whatever. Um, and I think it can be so difficult for people. And I think the best thing, if you can, well, be strong in your belief, because you know obesity is such a massive, massive welfare issue in this country. And if you're doing something about it, then you're the one doing the good thing for your horse, and the people who aren't are not. So, you know, keep strong in your belief. But I think the more you can kind of engage people, especially livery yard owners, the better. So we were talking about this before, and James was saying sometimes he speaks with livery yard managers as well, if it's possible to do that. And I know when I've spoken to behaviorists actually who have had issues with managing weight, or things need to change on a yard, then they often try and engage the livery yard manager as well, to kind of get them on board and help them to understand why things need to change, so that it's not just like, you're not just a client who's like, oh, I suddenly need to soak hay and I'm going to use up all this extra water and cover the yard in
Yeah,
cover
yeah,
the yard in it, and all those things
yeah,
that they find really awkward. So yeah, I would say engage as much as possible, share resources, anything like that.
yeah.
What do you reckon, James?
I think that's true. I think making use of your vet to do some of the
Mm,
difficult conversations potentially. I won't always
yeah,
manage, but
yeah,
if everyone can collaborate, and
mm,
the vet can maybe impress
yeah,
upon people how important it's not just one voice. It's maybe something.
Yeah.
I don't think the vet will be the magic answer every time.
No.
But the more voices to the conversation probably helps,
Yeah.
and helps that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. As a vet, do you mind doing that? I was just interested because you said use your vet, but I sometimes feel with my own vet that I don't want to ever ask him for like like I'm aware that his time is limited. But how do
so
you feel about being asked to do that?
I think often it you can't have this situation every time, but you know
Mm,
often the vet for the yard also is the vet for the yard owner,
mm,
and then it's more of a casual
mm,
conversation rather than
mhm,
approaching the yard owner thing, which is much trickier
mm,
to get
right.
right. Um, so when you're in that circumstance,
Mm,
I'm more than happy to just chat and say,
mm,
is there any way we can find a small paddock or
yeah,
do something creative, even if it's just in the
right.
short term, um,
Mm,
to get a start on that weight loss. I always find that's the most difficult bit.
right.
Once things are moving and improving, everyone feels good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I think
That's really
that's why we were saying before. We've When we set up the practice here at Glasgow, we got a set of portable scales.
mm,
And I think it's worked really well because although people don't need numbers to lose weight, and you've got your weigh
mm,
tape and everything like that, I
mm,
think having a number in your head and then 3 months later getting another weigh
yeah,
in and getting another number,
mm,
when you're, at the beginning and you're losing 10, 15,
mm,
20 kilograms, you know, that's often not visible. And
mm,
I think owners can get discouraged because they think, well, I'm doing all this work and nothing's happening.
yeah,
And the scales
absolutely.
help pick that up and
Mm,
maybe
yeah.
encourage people.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with internal fat as well, we can't even see it, but it's coming off the horse
Yeah,
and you can only really pick that up on
yeah,
scales. So I think if,
absolutely.
if you've got them, they're amazing as a
Yeah,
resource. It's such a shame that they're hard to come by for a lot of owners. So I think the ones near your practice
yeah,
are very lucky.
yeah. We're certainly trying to get around as many yards as possible, and it's much
Mm,
more efficient than I'd ever thought.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we get quite a lot done.
that's
Um,
fantastic.
and I'll be listening into your talk for ways to approach the weight loss. Identifying the weight is often easier than losing the weight, but I
Yeah,
think
that's the same with
identifying the
us
weight's the
humans, right?
first step. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the same for us all after following lockdown. We can all
yeah.
identify there's been a bit of
It's really difficult. Well, Tamsin, I
Mm.
really really appreciate having you on, and that's been good. And guys, I would really really encourage you to join her talk next Thursday. Is that right, Tamsin?
Yes, it
Yes.
is. Yes.
Next
Yeah.
Thursday, and I will post a link in the comments to sign up. And I think it'll be really constructive and have some really useful tools. And I'll be joining in too to try and improve my advice. Um, it's based on quite a lot of research, which is also quite good because a lot of weight things aren't based on research. And you
Yeah.
know, Tamsin summary, and she always puts, and I think it's right. Obesity is the largest equine welfare problem, um,
Mm.
and in a way, it's the cheapest for us to tackle because it
Mm.
generally means getting rid of something
Yeah.
or stopping
True.
feeding. So it's really
Yeah.
one that we should be tackling. There's really
Mm.
no cost excuse. So
Mm.
yeah, Tamsin, thanks for joining us, and
My pleasure.
we'll hear from you on next Thursday.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it. I'll see you all
Brilliant.
soon. Thank you. Thanks then.
Thanks.